pot.
I don't like to brag and I don't like to boast, said Peter T. Hopper. But speaking of toast, and speaking of kitchens, and ketchup and cake, and kettles and stoves, and that stuff people bake. Well, I don't like to brag, but I'm telling you, Les, that speaking of cooks, I'm the best that there is. Why, only last Tuesdays, when Mother was out, I really cooked something worth talking about. You see, I was sitting here, resting my legs, and I happened to pick up a couple of eggs, and I sort of got thinking it's sort of a shame that scrambled eggs always taste always the same. That's because ever since goodness knows when, they've always been made from the eggs of a hen. Just a plain common hen. What a dumb thing to use with all of the other fine eggs you could choose. And so I decided that just for a change, I'd scramble a new kind of egg on the range. Some fancy eggs that no other cook cooks, like the eggs of the ruffle-necked salamagooks. Salamagookses say they should be good, so I went out and found some as quick as I could. And while I was lugging them back to the house, I happened to notice a teasel-topped grouse in a tree down the street, and I knew from her looks, her egg and her egg of the salamagooks off to mix smartly well, out to taste simply super when scrambled together by Peter T. Hopper. So I took those eggs home and I frizzled them up, and I added some sugar, 2/3 of a cup, and a small pinch of pepper, and also a pound of the radish sauce that was sitting around. And also some nuts. When I tasted the stuff, and it tasted quite fine, but not quite fine enough to make the best scramble that's ever been made. A cook has to hook the best eggs ever laid. So I drove to the country. I'd rather far out, and I studied the birds that were flitting about. To make the best scramble that's ever been made, a cook has to hook. I looked with great care at the mop-noodled French. I looked at the beagle-beaked, bald-headed Grange. And also I looked at the shade-roosting quail, who was roosting like under a lasalac's tail. And I looked at the spreads and the flannel-weaving jay. But I just didn't stop. I kept right on my way, 'cause they didn't have eggs. They weren't laying that day. Then suddenly, boy, up that hill a short space. Birds! They were laying over the plays, great happy gay, families of uncles and cousins, all laying fine strictly, fresh eggs by the dozens. Why, I'd have a scramble more super than super, scrambled eggs super, deep duper, be deep hooper, special deluxe a la Peter T. Hooper. I picked the eggs in a most careful way. I only picked those that I knew were grade A. I only took eggs from the very best fowls, so I didn't take eggs from the twiddler owls, 'cause I knew that the eggs of the fellows who twiddle. I went for kind that were mellow and sweet, and the world's sweetest eggs are the eggs of the queet, which is due to those very sweet trout that they eat. And those trout, well, they're sweet 'cause they only eat wogs, and wogs, after all, are the world's sweetest frogs. And the reason they're sweet, whenever they lunch, it's always the world's sweetest bees. And they much than the reason no bees can be sweeter than these. They only eat blossoms of beetle-nut trees. And these beetle-nut blossoms are sweeter than sweet. And that's why I nabbed several eggs from the queet. I passed up the eggs of a bird called a strudel, who's sort of a stork, but with fur like a poodle. For they say that the eggs of this kind of a stork are gooey like glue, and they stick your fork, and the yolks of these eggs, I'm told, taste like fleece, while the whites taste like very old bicycle grease. The places I hiked to, the roads that I rambled to find the best eggs that have ever been scrambled, I hunted new birds along wild tangled trails, through gullies and gulches, down dingles and dales. I wiggled my way and I crawled at a creep through the forest of ferns that was 40 miles deep. And I must throw the brush till I found fine Quaker, whose eggs are as big as a pinhead, no bigger. And I went for the eggs of a long-legged quong. Now this quong, well, she's spelled just a little bit wrong, for her legs are so terribly, terribly long that she has to lay eggs 20 feet in the air, and they drop with a plop to the ground from up there. So unless you can catch them before the eggs crush, you haven't got eggs. You've got the long-legged hash. Eggs! I'd collect 302. I needed still more, and I suddenly knew that the job was too big for one fellow to do, so I telegraphed north to some friends near Fazol, which is 10 miles or so just beyond the North Pole. And they all of them jumped and were catamassite, which is sort of a boat made of sea leopard's hide, which they sailed out to sea to go looking for rice, which is sort of a bird which lays eggs on the ice. The ice which they grabbed with a tool which is known as a squish, 'cause those eggs are too cold to be touched without which. And while we were sending those eggs, I got word of a bird that does something that's almost unheard of. It's hard to believe, but this bird called a pelf lays eggs that are 3 times as big as herself. How that pelf ever learned such a difficult trick, I never found out, but they found that egg quick, and I managed to get it down out of the nest and home to the kitchen, along with the rest. But I didn't stop then, 'cause I knew of some ducks by the name of the single file zombies and zucks, who stroll single file through the mountains of zums, quite oddly enough, with their eggs on their thumbs. And some fellows and zums whom happened to know thus happened to capture 1,000 or so, and they wrapped eggs and they mailed them by air, marked special delivery, handle with care. I needed more help in forest. Since I called up a fellow named Ali, long distance. And Ali, as soon as he hung up the phone, picked up a small basket and started alone to climb the steep crags and the jags of Mount Struku to fetch me the egg of a Mount Struku cocoa. Now these Mount Struku cocos are rather small gals, but these Mount Struku cocos have lots of big pals. They died from the skies with wild cackling shrieks, and they jabbed at his legs, and they stabbed at his cheeks with their yammering, clamoring, hammering beaks. But Ali, brave Ali, he fought his way through, and he sent me that egg as I knew he would do. For my scrambled eggs super duper pooper, special deluxe a la Peter the Hooper. In the meanwhile, of course, I was being real busy collecting the eggs of the free eyelash tizzy were quite hard to reach, so I rolled at the top of a ham, egg, a snam, egg, a snam, egg, a snap. When I found a great flock of southwest-facing cranes, and I guess they've got something that's wrong with their brains. Or this kind of a crane, when she's guarding her nest, while away stand facing precisely southwest. So to get out those eggs wasn't hard in the least. I came from behind from precisely northeast, and I captured the egg of a prickly cactus, who lays them up high in a prickly cactus. Then I went for some zifs, were exactly like zoffs, but the zifs live on cliffs, and the zoffs live on bluffs, and seeing how the bluffs are exactly like cliffs, it's mighty hard telling the zoffs from the zifs. But I know that the egg that I got from the bluff, if it wasn't a zifs from the cliffs, was a zoffs. Now I needed the egg of a moth watching sniff, who's a bird who's so big she scares people to death. And this awful big bird, well, the reason they name her the moth watching sniff is 'cause that's how they tame her. She likes to watching moths, sort of quiets her mind, and while she is watching, you sneak up behind and you yank out her egg. So I got one, of course, with the help of some friends and a very fast horse. If you want to get eggs you can't buy at the store, you'll have to do things never thought of before. Why, to get at the egg of one a very small dove, we had to pry all of one mountain top off. And I heard this of some birds who lay eggs, if you please, that taste like the air and the holes of Swiss cheese. And they live in big Zanzibar trees. So I ordered a tree full. The job was immense, but I needed those eggs and hang the expense. I still needed one more, and I saved it for last, the egg of the frightful, bombastic aghast. And that bird is so mean, and that bird is so fast, and that I had to escape on a jellica jazz. A fleet-footed beast who can run like a deer, but looks sort of different, you steer him by ear. Or throw with the searching, or throw with the looking, I had all I needed, and now for the cooking. I rushed to the kitchen, the place where I'd stacked them. I rolled up my sleeves, I unpacked them and cracked them and shocked them and shocked them in 19 pans. Then I mixed and sort beans. I used 45 cans. Then I mixed and some ginger, 9 prunes, and 3 figs, and parsley, quite sparsely, just 22 sprigs. When I added 6 cinnamon sticks and the clove, and my scramble was ready to go on the stove. And you know how they tasted. They tasted just like, well, they taste exactly just like scrambled eggs super duper de booper special deluxe a la Peter T. Hooper.
The end. Would you like to hear your recording from the beginning?
I don't like